I didn't begin with crying. I began with temperature. In the world of crocodiles, gender is not chosen by our parents, but by the warmth of the sun resting on our eggshells. Too hot, I will become the ruler of the estuary. Too cold, I will be a small but relentless female. But if the temperature strikes the perfect balance, I am born to outlive them all. My mother hid us like weapons, not in a cave, not underwater, but beneath warm sand, a few tail lengths from the riverbank. She dug the nest with her hind legs, silent as shadow, layered eggs like stones, then buried us beneath sand, mud, and dried leaves, not to keep us warm, but to hide us from others, because here, even crocodile eggs are a feast. Monitor lizards invade the nest, crows peck through shells, snakes follow the scent, even other crocodiles. Before we had eyes, before we had teeth, we already knew. To be born is to be hunted. Inside the egg, I heard everything. I hadn't opened my eyes, yet I could feel vibrations as a python crawled past the nest. Hear a beak tapping something hard, too close for comfort. Sense tree roots creeping down like searching fingers. And above all, recognize the heavy footsteps of mother returning to guard us each night. They think the unborn are safe inside their shells. No. Inside the egg, I learned fear before I learned to breathe. The day the shell cracked became my first battle. No one helped me out. I had to. Carve through the shell with my egg tooth. Twist in a space too small for movement. Shove shards of calcium aside, and push toward the surface for the first time in my life. When my head broke free, light was not the first thing to greet me. It was the smell of mud, of water, of predators. I knew I was alive, because I was afraid. We called for mother before we ever saw her. The first sound I made was not a roar, not a hiss. It was small. Tip, tip, a signal, a cry for rescue. A message. I'm out. Please don't let me die here. Beneath the sand, dozens of siblings answered back. A chorus of tiny lives in a world much too vast. And then, the ground trembled. The water rippled into waves. The air thickened with the presence of something no one dared challenge. Mother. She didn't come to embrace us. She came because, if she didn't arrive in the next 60 seconds, we would vanish from the world in those same 60 seconds. My mother didn't speak. She acted. One sweep of her tail sand exploded. The nest collapsed into a crater. Her jaws opened wide, not to eat, but to gather us in. To others, it was the mouth of death. To us, it was the first armored vehicle of our lives. One by one, she picked us up, gentle enough to make me doubt whether those were the same teeth longer than my whole body. But outside those jaws, I heard everything. Crows diving, monitor lizards scrambling, snakes sliding like living ropes, and far away, human footsteps. They knew the nest had been breached. They knew the meal was escaping. 9 meters felt like a lifetime. From the nest to the water, only 40 meters. But for a hatchling crocodile, it was. 40 meters of being hunted. 40 meters with nowhere to hide. 40 meters deciding who lives and who disappears. Mother set us down at the muddy edge and jerked her head forward. No words needed. It was a command. Run. My siblings scattered like drops of black rain on the earth. No formation. No plan. Just instinct. Those who are faster get a few more seconds to live. The scent of death arrives before the killer's shape. I never saw the monitor lizard first, but I smelled its rancid breath. I never saw the hunting bird first, but I heard the air rip beneath its wings. I never saw the snake first, but I felt the ground tremble with its winding motion. 1 second of hesitation meant forever gone. Not all of us reached the water. I didn't look back, but I heard a tiny cry, cut short, skull pierced by a beak, a struggle in dry leaves, body clamped in a lizard's jaws, a dragging sound that never stopped, coils tightening, pulling downward into the underbrush. The odds were never 50 over 50, not even 1 inch 10. It was, whoever touches the water first earns the right to continue their story. The rest became punctuation. I hit the water like falling into the mouth of a god. When my belly met soft mud, then warm, cloudy river water, a current shot through my body. I knew I had survived the first gate, not been chosen as the opening meal, not stayed behind like so many silent bodies on the shore. My body turned weightless. My tail moved on its own. My feet paddled to a rhythm I had never been taught. No one trained me. Survival is my species' mother tongue. From beneath the surface, I looked up. The sky offered no congratulations. It only lifted the sun higher, a cold reminder disguised as daylight. Tomorrow will be harder than today. And then, a long, dark shadow slipped beneath the water, fast, silent, deliberate. Not my mother, not another hatchling, but a hunter living in our own domain. I thought the water was the finish line. I thought the water was armor. I thought the moment I touched the swamp, I had won. I was wrong. Water doesn't save anyone. Water only chooses those who know how to survive in it. The shadow beneath the silt was no myth. It didn't roar. It didn't rise. It didn't ripple the surface. It moved like a current flowing the wrong way. Silent, low, inevitable. Only its eyes burned. Gold, still, like smoldering coal. Another adult crocodile. Not my mother. Not an ally. Not a guardian of hatchlings. In this world, young are the future of the species, but also the easiest meal the species can find. My mother did not protect us like you imagine. There was no scream, no chase, no heroic rescue scene. She only lifted her tail above the surface and slammed it once. Boom. It didn't need to hit the threat. It only needed to deliver a message. This territory is claimed. The larger crocodile paused, turned its burning eyes, and slowly sank away, as if it had never been there, not retreating out of fear, but understanding the rule. Steal unattended hatchlings if you want. Pick a fight with a mother on guard, and it's not worth it. I learned then, being protected does not mean being safe. Mother cannot shield us forever. She cannot live our lives for us. She can only buy us time to learn, not to vanish. And in those seconds, I learned 3 truths. Danger doesn't only come from land. The deadliest threat may share your own blood. Survival is not a reward, it's a daily assignment. My first hunting lesson was not about catching prey. It was realizing how close I came to becoming one. After her warning strike, the water calmed again, but it was no longer gentle to me. I began to avoid open water, cling to thick floating weeds for cover, swim in zigzags like shifting sediment, keep only eyes and nostrils above the surface, not because I was skilled, but because being unseen keeps you alive longer than showing strength. That night, I ate my first meal. Not a fish, not a frog. Certainly nothing glorious. It was a creature too small for documentaries to acknowledge. A tiny water beetle drifting on the surface. I didn't chew it. I swallowed it whole, like a vow. From today on, I am no one's meal. It wasn't big. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't worth telling stories about. But it marked the greatest transformation. I went from the hunted to one who knows how to hunt. And in that same night, I heard a soft splash in the distance. Not a fish, not mother, the touch of an oar. A sound not born from nature, not wind, not animal footstep. A sound that meant humans had entered my life for the first time. Small, quiet, but enough to rewrite the rest of my story. I didn't grow up through time. I grew up through narrow escapes. A morning where I still had my limbs, my tail, my scars to tell stories with, was another day enrolled in the school of the swamp. There are no perfect scores here, only pass or perish. I wasn't taught how to hunt. I figured it out. Mother never explained, never demonstrated, never made me watch. She simply swam, vanished, surfaced, snapped, jerked, rolled, swallowed, and let me conclude the lesson myself. Hunting is not an action, it is patience with teeth. I started small. Water bugs, larvae, tadpoles, fish smaller than my snout. Each meal was another lecture. Miss the strike, reveal your position. Air bubbles alert predators. Rippled water warn the prey. I learned to eat without sound, bite without shutting my eyes, swallow without ever stopping my watch. My enemies were anything that could see me. Above, hawks hanging like unfinished sentences. Herons with beaks longer than mercy. Eagles that need only one drop of silence to take a life as small as mine. Below, water, snakes, threading, zigzag trails. Big crocodiles guarding the deep like gates that should never open. Snapping turtles with jaws that don't forgive small mistakes. On land, monitor lizards pace like patient gravediggers. Foxes slow but stubborn, and the two-legged footprints, sometimes unseen, but never unfelt. I learned to smell before I look, sink before I run, observe before I hunger. I never won any glorious battles. I only avoided losing. There were days I nearly lost an eye to a heron's spear, vanished into mangrove roots, dragged by a snake, sank into the deep, pulled by my own kind, or worst of all, betrayed myself with impatience. And with every near-death pulse, the swamp taught me, no one cares how often you almost died. They only notice if you're still alive. I learned my strongest weapon was never my teeth, but invisibility. I practiced staying under longer than breathing aloud, trained my nostrils to be two dots that refused moonlight, let my eyes float while my body became driftwood. I realized, prey does not die because I am fast. It dies because I don't exist to it until the final second. This became the first art I mastered. Then came my first rainy season. The water rose faster than I did. The current pushed harder than expected. The swamp expanded, which meant borders erased. Outsiders rushing in. More food and more danger. Mother no longer swam beside me, not because she left, but because she no longer needed to follow me. I needed to learn which shadows to choose on my own. That night, laying motionless under floating vines, I felt the first truth of adulthood, not strength, but the loneliness of surviving without making a sound. And also, that night, a new sound entered the swamp. Not wind, not a boat, not an animal. A faint metallic vibration touching water, a noise nature has never learned to make. Nature has a rhythm. Wind moves in cycles. Birds fly by clocks. Animals approach water by the measure of sunlight. But the sound I heard that night was out of rhythm, out of place. The first sound quiet, but wrong. Ting, faint, then gone. Metal touching water. Not stone, not roots, not a cracked shell slipping from a fish's bite. That sound had intent. That sound was guided. Moments later came the oars, but not the kind rowed by someone passing through. It was the kind of stroke that was slow, soft, economical. Water kept flat. Silence engineered. The kind of rowing made by someone who does not want to be noticed, but wants to notice everything else. The smell came after the sound. Not the clean sweat of a human. Not forest. Something layered. Unnatural at the time. Unexplainable then. Metal. Wet rope. A whisper of faded gasoline. And smoke dried into fabric. I didn't know what it was. I only knew it did not belong to the swamp. The water split into two worlds. I stayed motionless, only my eyes above the surface. From that low angle I saw the natural water soft, irregular, blended, the tampered water sliced into thin, straight trails, then sealed again. Nature does not move in straight lines. Humans do. I couldn't see them, but I knew they could see me. Not directly, not with eyes, but through intention. A long pole lowered, tipped with a curved metal hook, drifting gently along the edges of floating vines. Not fishing, not steering, searching, probing for what did not flee, probing for what stayed still, probing for something hiding but alive, probing for creatures like me. The most terrifying thing is not being seen. It is being understood. Is forest predators chase on instinct, strike at movement, are fooled by stillness. Humans are different. They predict, they calculate, they wait like math does. They search for what does not show itself. They hunt with thought, not teeth. I almost betrayed myself once. When the metal ring brushed the water close to my snout, instinct screamed to snap, thrash, dive, or flee. But by then, I had learned a truth older than my age. Against a thinker, even reflexes confess your location, so I didn't move, didn't exhale harder, didn't shift my stare. I disappeared while existing. The metal ring grazed the edge of my scales once, then slid past, dismissing me as rotten driftwood with no pulse. They didn't give up. They marked. Before leaving, something small dropped into the water. Plop gentle, intentional. A dark float no bigger than a fist, half sunk, bobbing subtly, refusing to drift. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. It was a hunter's map pin. Something worth returning for is here. That night, the swamp stopped being home. It became a monitored zone, a counted coordinate, a place that would see a second visit, and a third. And one day, Iskonseek, I didn't swim away. I didn't warn others. I didn't tell Mother. I only realized, from now on, I no longer hide from creatures that hunt. I must hide from the ones that think. The swamp has two kinds of creatures that live long. The ruler loud, massive, territorial, a name everyone knows. The shadow unseen, unspoken of, because no one can swear it even exists. My mother was the first. I quietly became the second. I don't roar. I don't flash my teeth. I don't slap the water to announce myself. The louder the world gets, the deeper I disappear. I grew fast, but never let anyone measure me. Each passing month, body longer, tail stronger, jaw wider, bite no longer driven by fear, but calculation. But I don't display strength like a trophy. A true predator never lets prey know it exists. I don't chase anymore. I wait. Once, seeing prey meant attack. Now it means disappear. I trained to lie motionless for hours, let algae grow on my scales without flinching, Let fish brush my belly without muscle memory reacting. Let birds land near my snout without blinking. Skill is not speed. Skill is letting prey walk itself into death without suspicion. My bite is no longer loud, but it is final. An adult crocodile can crush bone with ease. I don't need to advertise that. I bite in a way that is one motion, silent, locked, pulled under. No thrashing, no struggle, no violent water explosions. The swamp favors deaths that make no waves. I began being spoken of without being seen. On moonless nights, when the water rests like glass, the swamp started whispering a new feeling. There is something here now, something different. No one could point to me. No one knew my location. But evidence became rumor. Fish vanished close to shore. Strangely, antelopes stopped drinking where they used to. Night birds changed their resting trees. And even young crocodiles no longer swam far. I became a presence that created caution without revealing shape. That is the moment you stop being an animal in the food chain. You become the myth of the food chain. But growing in silence is also an invitation to humans. Hunters do not fear what they see. They fear what they know is there, but cannot locate, cannot predict, cannot control. Mystery fascinates them. Mystery challenges them. Mystery becomes a target. I stopped being accidental prey. I became something worth claiming. Then came the clearest warning. Not a trap, not a net, not the sound of boats. It was this. At dusk, the animals that once dared drink beside me stopped showing up at all. Not because of me, because they sensed humans arriving before I did. Nature always warns accurately. Prey just never learns the language. Last time, they scouted the land. This time, they mapped the battlefield. Hunters don't return alone. They return like an oil spill with intention and formation. I knew it not from sight first, but from the sudden absence of sound. When nature goes silent all at once, it means the true apex predator is moving. And that night, the silence did not belong to me. They weren't hiding in the swamp anymore. They were hiding around it. I smelled them before I saw anything, because their scent arrived in layers, not singular notes. Mud mixed with machine oil, damp cloth dried under open sky, cold cigarette, ash lung extinguished, oxidized metal soaked in fresh water, and the sharp, restless sweat of humans bracing for action. Not fishermen, not wanderers. These were men hunting something worth hunting. This time, the trap had no bait, because I was the bait. Wooden stakes were driven deeper than I remembered the water reaching. Cables half submerged. Not obvious. Not hidden. Hooks carried no meat. No fish. No frog. No rotting lure. Because their bait wasn't flesh. It was the territorial instinct of a predator too large to ignore intrusion. They didn't need to lure me in. They forced my path to pass through them. The swamp was no longer open ground. It was geometry. This was no hunt. It was containment. They shaped a narrower channel than before, two silent flanks blocked by submerged poles, a center point neither deep nor shallow, impossible to turn inside, and a dry clearing behind ready for lifting, locking, claiming. An invisible funnel, slow, precise, patient. Only then did I realize they learned from last time. Before, they studied me. Now, they studied how I react to fear. Because hunters of animals track movement. Hunters of predators track behavior. And in that moment I understood. They were no longer hunting my body. They were hunting the shape of my choices. The moment forced a decision. I had 3 paths. Stay still, and the net closes in. Retreat, fall into the rear blockade. push forward step exactly where they want me. I chose forward, not because it was safe, but because it was the last direction that was still mine to choose. I surfaced on purpose for the first time, not to hide. My eyes broke the water, not to observe, but to confirm whether the ones hunting me were already watching. And I saw them, 3 figures, no shift in weight, no hurried breath, no blinking, the same stillness I once used to stalk prey. Only one thing was different. This time, I was the one. The moment you realize you're surrounded is not the moment you panic the most. It's the moment you realize there are no right choices left, only choices that hurt less. The swamp was no longer nature. It had become a chessboard whose rules I never learned. They weren't rushing, because rushing gives the prey an advantage. No shouting, no blinding floodlights, no intimidation, no forcing the moment. Just a glint of metal beneath the surface, a cable drawn tighter than before, small circular ripples overlapping like signals, and silence that carried weight. I understood. They didn't want to chase me. They wanted to move me like a piece on their board. I tested my first move. I slammed my tail down. Boom. Not to attack, to observe. Water exploded upward. Mud painted the air. Reeds burst apart. One of the 3 figures shifted his foot. Only 2 centimeters, but enough to reveal. They were counting strike distance, not fear. Their eyes were monitoring my tail, not my jaws. Their plan was built to neutralize my body, not my bite. Common hunters fear a crocodile's teeth. Experienced ones fear the tail. They aimed at the correct weapon. I tested depth, wrong choice. I tested shallow water, also wrong. Deep, tangled in submerged cable. Shallow, exposed, hook range tightened. Then I saw the truth of their design. They weren't catching me with a trap. They were catching me by managing my options. There was only one move I hadn't tried. Total stillness. The last weapon of something that has nowhere left to retreat. Breathing slowed. Stomach motionless. Eyelids half lowered. Muscles locked, but not straining. I became the shape the human eye dismisses first. A piece of soaked driftwood. Time thickened like wet clay. Fem-minutes. T-minutes. Fem-minutes. Mosquitoes fed on my eyelids, I didn't blink. Small fish brushed my ribs, I didn't flinch. A leaf clung to my teeth, I didn't react. But humans don't lose the patience game they invented. One of them crouched. No haste. No rhythm broken. A long pole tipped with a steel loop lowered toward my face. No stabbing. No provoking. Just placed at the one point I could not ignore if I was still alive. Because no living creature, no matter how disciplined, can stay indifferent when cold metal touches the eye. I blinked. Once. 1/10 of a second? 0.1 seconds. A confession. I was alive. The command came, soft, alien to the language of the wild. Now, 3 movements fired as one. Steel loop cinched behind my head. A restraining cable locked across my body. A pulling force shifted my center of balance off the mud. My tail whipped, but too late for momentum. My jaw opened, but outside their range. My body twisted, but the restraint had chosen the correct pivot points. No shouting. No struggle cries. This was not a hunt. This was a collection. When I left the water, I was not lifted like a defeated monument. I was dragged, steady, measured, efficient. No theatrics. No extra brutality. The swamp did not protest. The water did not cling. The wind did not change direction. Nature doesn't interfere once human rules seal the board. My back touched dry ground for the first time in years. Not by my choice. Not by strategy. But by calculations made long before I recognized the game. And that was the first time a painful truth became clear to me. I believed victory belonged to the patient. I forgot that humans don't just have patience. They multiply it with planning, and multiply planning with tools. Instinct kept me alive for thousands of days, but instinct cannot defeat strategy drawn with diagrams. They didn't kill me. To the outside world, that looks like mercy. To them, it looks like luck. But the cruelest part of the human world isn't death. It's being kept alive in a place you no longer belong. I left the swamp without fighting, not because I was completely powerless, but because the final instinct of something once dominant is this: do not panic before everything is truly gone. They transported me in a covered truck. No rattling chains, no victorious shouting, just silence like cargo that has already been priced. I couldn't see the sky. I could only feel vibrations through the metal floor, smell hot rubber, and hear the pulse of machinery. The swamp faded, not by images, but by the absence of sound. No night frogs, no rhythmic insects, no smell of living mud, no taste of wet wilderness. My freedom didn't leave all at once. It slipped away, sense by sense. In the new place, they didn't call my name. They called my measurements. When the tarp lifted, the first thing I saw wasn't a human. It was glass. Thick, clear, cold, odorless. The kind of surface you can't bite through, can't feel heat from, can't mark. They measured me. Length, weight, estimated bite force, age by scale, pattern. No one measured where I once ruled, how I once vanished into water, or the fear I once survived. Here, I am not a creature. I am data. They feed me regularly. That is the cruelest part. No hunger, no dirty water, no beatings, no suffering visible to the eye. But none of this exists anymore. No stalking, no choosing shadows, no hunting wind direction, no waiting in stillness before the strike. I am no longer surviving. I am merely being kept. To humans, being fed means being cared for. To my kind, losing the ability to enact instinct is a sentence. The eyes that once ruled dark water now only reflect fluorescent lights. Children point at me. Why does it just lie there? Is it lazy? Why isn't it scary? I'm not lazy. I just no longer have a reason to react. Ferocity belongs to those who still have territory, rivals, battles, seasons, hunger, something to defend, or something to lose. I have none of those. Once, I was the shadow of the swamp. Now, I am a silent display behind glass. The last thing I lost wasn't my bite or my tail. It was a future predictable by instinct. In the wild, tomorrow is never the same as today. Here, tomorrow is today. And today is yesterday. And the rest of my life will loop the same shape. The deepest pain I ever felt wasn't the tightening of cables. It was the moment I understood. They didn't end my life. They ended the reason I lived it like a crocodile. And so the legend of the swamp concluded. Not with gunfire, not with blades, not with blood, but with a silence longer than the lifespan of the wild. They think they preserved me, but really, they preserved a version of me that is no longer me at all.